We are very pleased to have Professor Bill Spencer to agree to be with us. And the first part is the introduction. Professor Bill Spencer is the Nathan and Ann Newmark Endowed Chair in Civil Engineering at the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Illinois, Director of the Newmark Structural Engineering Laboratory, Director of the Multi-Axial Full-Scale Substructure Testing and Simulation Facility, Director of the Smart Structures Technology Laboratory. I think because most of you know his accomplishments, some highlights, very involved in American Society of Civil Engineering. This is when he was distinguished member in a couple of years ago in Chicago with the director and the president of ASCE. The reason when we were organizing these webinars, we wanted to have an opportunity to see the passion, mentoring, career advice that we can all learn from Professor Spencer. He is very involved in students. He likes to look forward with them to what's ahead. And we are glad to be here listening to him from the very young age to graduate students and beyond. I think we'll be asking today some questions about what we are able to learn today from his time. We are basically looking forward to start. I think if that's okay with everyone, I will start with the first question, and then I will ask some of the organizers with me help me on moving around with these seven questions that we have for the fireside chat. So let's start at the beginning. Professor Bill Spencer, was there a particular time, moment, class, project, or person that helped you realize academia was the right path for you?
Well, first of all, thank you, Fernando, for the kind and generous introduction. I'm not sure I can live up to all of that, but I'm very grateful, and it's a real pleasure to be here and have a chance to share a few reflections with this community. First of all, regarding the question, I did not grow up with a clear path to be a professor. In fact, I was the first person in my family to attend college. So academia was not a world that I really knew anything about, and I certainly never imagined that one day I'd be a professor myself. The first time that anyone suggested that possibility came in a rather unexpected way. I was a senior undergraduate in mechanical engineering at the University of Missouri-Rolla, and I was short of one humanities class that I needed in order to graduate on time. I was on the wrestling team then also, and the coach knew one professor in humanities that was a friend of his, and he suggested that I go talk with him. And this professor set me up with a rather unusual research project. He wanted me to study whether baseball pitchers were hit more by pitchers in the National League or in the American League. And the reason this was interesting is that in the National League, the pitchers had to come up to bat themselves. And so if they beamed a batter, there was more risk for them. Whereas in the American League, they had a designated hitters. That is, somebody else could go to the batting box for them. And so this was long before the internet, and I had to go to the St. Louis Public Library and pull old editions of Sporting News and manually compile statistics from box scores, etc. And as I recall, the designated hitters in the American League did seem to shift the statistics. That is, there were more National League pitchers who were exposed in the lineup. And when I completed the project, I was able to graduate with an A in the class. But more importantly, when I turned in that report, the professor said something like, "You did a pretty good job here. Have you ever thought about becoming a professor? It can be a rewarding life." And that was really the first time that I'd ever had that thought enter my mind. That seed was planted there, and my PhD at Illinois further fostered this idea, particularly Professor Larry Bergman, who was my advisor He encouraged me to consider a faculty position. But when I graduated, I went ahead and I interviewed for government, industry, and academia positions. And I had good options, but I kept coming back to the possibility of pursuing a job in academe. And eventually, I took a position at the University of Notre Dame as an assistant professor in civil engineering. And that decision shaped the rest of my career. So the lesson takeaway from this story is that career paths are not always planned in a straight line. Sometimes seemingly minor moments, even missing a humanities credit, as was my case, can open a door that you didn't even know existed.
I was speechless. No, I was muted, but it was very very inspiring and very interesting.
Well,
And
I would guess that very few people know that story. Maybe this is the first time I've ever told many of my students or colleagues. So, but that's how it all came to be.
well, very very new for me, definitely. Uh, so we're gonna go with the fireside and ask around. I'm gonna now again ask Professor Napolitano to take the torch for the next two questions if she's available, and I'll mute myself.
Yeah, I'm here. I mean, Bill, it was fantastically relatable to hear that from you and know that you didn't think from birth that you were going to be an SHM expert. Because it makes me feel like I'm not too behind the eight ball on things then. So thanks for being so relatable. My question is it's about AI and data-driven methods. And so, I mean, structural health monitoring is being reshaped by AI and data-driven methods essentially in real time. And I'm interested to hear from you what recent development genuinely excites you, and where do you think we need to be careful about all the hype?
Thank you for that question. Indeed, one of the most persistent challenges in structural health monitoring is moving from observation to information, to meaning of that data. Most of us in the field, we collect sensor data. We can detect changes in vibration characteristics. We can use images to identify cracks, corrosion, spalling, or visible signs of deterioration. But the deeper engineering question is what that observation actually means. Does it affect safety? Does it affect the remaining life? Does it require immediate intervention? Or is it something that can be monitored over time? That translation of data to decision has always been difficult. And for many years in our group and in others, we approach this problem primarily through physics-based models and first principle reasoning. These tools remain essential, but real civil engineering structures are messy. They're complicated, and structures age differently in different ways. Boundary conditions are uncertain, materials degrade, loading histories are incomplete. Environmental effects can mask damage. So the real world is much more complicated than our clean analytical models. What excites me about AI and data-driven methods is their ability to help uncover complex, nonlinear relationships that are very difficult to model explicitly. For example, in post-earthquake assessment, which our group has done a good bit of in recent years, computer vision and drone-based inspection can help us collect information faster than traditional manual inspection and safer too. The drones can access areas on a structure that human inspectors can't. And machine learning can help us prioritize what needs attention and identify patterns that may not be obvious to a human inspector looking at thousands of images. But we need to be careful about the hype. Civil infrastructure is different from many AI applications because failures are rare, thankfully so. We don't have millions of examples of bridges collapsing or buildings failing that we can use to train models. And that means purely black box AI can be dangerous if it gives us confidence without true physical understanding. So I do see the future of AI being important, but not replacing mechanics. I see the future as combining mechanics, data sensing, simulation, and expert judgment, physics-informed machine learning, hybrid modeling, synthetic data, digital twins, uncertainty quantification. These are all important because they help us to use AI responsibly. So if I have one message, I'd say the goal is not simply to make predictions, but the goal is to make engineering decisions that are reliable and that we have confidence in.
Yeah, I definitely think your concept of what excites you and what hypes you are kind of the adding to that same message there. And it's always this question that we as professors are trying to get our students to answer, so what? And that idea of it giving us more time to really interrogate that, but also making sure that we interrogate that, I think is a really powerful lesson, especially for people who are just starting out now and AI is the norm for the methods that they get to start with. They don't have to worry about starting from scratch. So I think that's a really great lesson to hand off. Another question that we have for you is about hitting a wall. Every researcher hits a wall where maybe your model won't converge or your paper keeps getting rejected or there's a project that stalls. And I mean, when you're stuck, what's your process to get through it?
Thanks for that question. When I hit a roadblock, the first thing I tried to remember is that I'm probably not the first person to run into a problem of this kind. It may feel new because the context of my own research, but the underlying mathematical and conceptual issues often have a much longer history. Someone in another field may have thought about this decades earlier, actually probably has thought about this decades earlier. So my process is usually to step back from the immediate problem. If a model won't converge or an approach isn't working, it's tempting to keep pushing harder in the same direction, but sometimes that just doesn't work. Often it's better to step back and look at a wider lens and go back to the literature, talk to colleagues, look outside of my immediate area. Actually, what I found is that some of the most useful ideas in civil engineering have come from the intersection of control theory, signal processing, statistics, computer science, applied mathematics, mechanics, and civil engineering. A good example of this, many of us are quite familiar with this eigensystem realization algorithm or the ERA method. It was introduced by two researchers from the NASA Langley Research Center, Zhuang and Papa. And ERA has certainly become very important for system identification, modal analysis, damage identification. But the mathematical roots of that occurred almost 20 years later. There's a famous paper by Ho and Kalman on realization. But to be frank, it was not very accessible. That paper was published in English, but it was in a German journal, and they talked about Markov parameters. They didn't talk about system identification. So it was a system realization paper. So this is a powerful lesson that a method that became central for structural dynamics had its deep roots in another discipline, developed for a completely different purpose. And it reminds us that aerospace engineers or control theorists might have already solved the mathematical core of problems that we're struggling with in engineering today. So when I'm stuck, I try not to think, how do I force this civil engineering problem to work? I try to ask rather, what kind of problem is this really? Is it an estimation problem, an optimization problem, a stability problem, a system identification problem, a data fusion problem? And once I've identified that deeper structure, I go and look what tools already exist, even if they're from a different field. The other thing I've learned is not to isolate myself when I'm stuck. And I try to convince my students to do the same, to talk to people, to explain the problem out loud. And very often the process of explaining the difficulty to someone helps you see what you were missing.
No, I think that's a really humbling answer. The idea of someone else probably hit this problem. Turns out I'm not that unique in the way I got to this problem. Um,
Hmm.
and also the idea of talking it out. I know from computer science, it's called the rubber ducky method. And I've told my students, get a rubber ducky, put it on your desk. If you can explain it to that rubber ducky, then maybe you work your way through it. Do that before you come to me. It's going to be the same thing.
I,
So I think that's really relatable.
I haven't heard that before, but I'm going to use it in the future.
Oh yeah,
You can be
rubber ducky.
assured.
I recommend.
Hmm.
I'm going to hand it off to John Lee now, but thank you so much, Bill, for letting me ask those questions.
Thank you.
All right, Bill. Thanks, Bill. So the next question is sort of related to your shared experience. You've had accomplished career over the almost 40 years. You've worked on many topics, which span sensing, control, computing, and more recently AI. So could you share with us how have you decided when to go deeper into a topic versus when to move towards something that is new? And looking back now, so were there bets that paid off in ways that you did not expect?
Thank you, Jen. I have to say that I don't have this great master plan, even looking back on my career. But I've always benefited from an interdisciplinary foundation. My undergraduate degree was in mechanical engineering, and my graduate degrees were in theoretical and applied mechanics. And my PhD advisor, Larry Bergman, gave me advice that had a lasting impact on me. He encouraged me not to stay too narrowly inside my immediate research area. He pushed me to take courses that would give me a broader mathematical and technical foundation. So while I was in graduate school, I took courses in linear systems, in control theory, in electrical engineering, in real and complex analysis, in mathematics, in stochastic processes. And at the time, I didn't know exactly how all of this would be useful, but later it became enormously important for me. In particular, when structural control emerged as a major research area in the 1990s, I already had some mathematical language that was needed to engage with it. I could connect between structural dynamics, control theory, stochastic processes, experimental dynamics, computation, and that really made it easier to move into new areas without feeling that I was starting from zero. Over my career, that pattern has repeated itself. My work has moved through structural control, MR dampers, wireless sensors, stochastic optimization, cyber physical systems, computer vision, digital twins, and now AI-enabled infrastructure assessment. And those shifts may look like distinct pivots, new areas entirely. But to me, they were all connected through a quite common thread, that is, using sensing, computation, and mechanics to understand and improve the performance of civil infrastructure. So how do I decide between depth and breadth? I'm sure that you agree that we need both, but at different levels. You need depth in the questions that you care about at the time. And for me, those questions have always been how to make structures safer, smarter, and more resilient and more reliable. But you need breadth in the tools that you're willing to use. If you define yourself only by one method, your career can become narrow and very quickly stagnant. But if you define yourself in terms of important problems, then you can keep learning new tools as the field changes. When I first started as a professor in 1985, no one knew anything about MATLAB. Not a single civil engineer that I knew of throughout the entire United States. But now it's a ubiquitous tool. And so these new tools that come along, we need to take advantage of them. So some of the most productive lines of research in my career paid off because I did not think of them as high-risk bets at the time. They were simply natural extensions of the broad foundation that I got when I was in graduate school.
Fascinating. Thanks for sharing. I now understand why we were all asked to take signal processing and control. My students are doing that similar thing too. It's sort of a generation, um, you know, inherent from generation to generation. Is we we all know that your career has a strong international dimension. You've had collaborator all over the world with the deep collaborations across different countries and research communities. Could you share with us how has working across borders shaped the way you think about engineering problems and about the field itself?
Thank you, Jen. Indeed, the international dimension of my career is probably one of the most rewarding parts of my professional life. Um, Early in my career, I had the opportunity to work with outstanding colleagues from around the world. Two I'd like to mention are Professor Kazimierz Sobczak from the Polish Academy of Sciences in Warsaw and Professor Yozo Fujino from the University of Tokyo. Both of them visited me at the University of Notre Dame for extended periods. Later, I developed deep collaborations with colleagues in Korea, China, Japan, Europe, and many other places. And those collaborations shaped me in ways that went far beyond individual research papers. When you work internationally, you quickly realize that engineering problems are universal. But the context is not. Earthquakes, typhoons, aging infrastructure, structural deterioration, those are global problems. But the way different countries experience those problems can be very different. For example, the scale and the speed of infrastructure developed in parts of Asia recently forces you to think seriously about scalability and deployment. It's not enough to just develop a beautiful algorithm or experiment that works in the laboratory. You have to ask whether it can scale to major real-world problems. Examples of this are when we deployed wireless sensors on the Jindo Bridge in South Korea. That was a trilateral collaboration between Professor Fujino at the University of Tokyo, Professor Chunbong Yoon at KAIST, and the University of Illinois. It resulted at the time in the world's largest deployment of wireless sensors, and it allowed us to learn so much that wouldn't have been possible otherwise. Another example was the deployment of wireless sensors on the Dubai Eye, the world's tallest Ferris wheel in United Arab Emirates. These real-world deployments really change how you think. But moreover, working across borders also teaches you humility. Different research communities have different strengths. Some may be strong in theory, other in large-scale implementation, others in experimental testing, and others in sensing technology or field deployments. And when you collaborate internationally, you're exposed to different ways of framing the same problem. That has made me a better engineer. And that's also one of the reasons that since 2008, with the exception of during COVID, we've continually organized this summer school, the Asia Pacific Europe Summer School in Smart Structures Technology, to bring students from around the world together and introduce them early on to international collaboration. With more than 600 people, including many of those on this panel and in the audience who've participated in these events, it's really an investment in the next generation of individuals. So I guess in summary, this international experience with decades of collaboration, shared engineering challenges, and deep friendships across the communities has caused me to believe that engineering is, in many ways, an international language. We may work in different countries, but we're often trying to solve the same fundamental problems: how to make infrastructure safer, more resilient, and more beneficial. And working together, we can be more effective.
Sounds great. Yeah, fascinating. So I want to follow up a little bit on this aspect. You talked about the importance of having international collaborations, how that can push the field forward. Now, if you dial the clock back 40 years ago when you started as a young professor at Notre Dame, how did everything happen? Did that happen naturally, or did you actually seek international collaborators, or did people approach you, or I'm just curious about how everything happened and then that led to today's rich collaboration everywhere?
I tell you, it was very serendipitous, to be truthful. The most important thing was that at the University of Notre Dame, they had the Melchor Distinguished Chair. And that allowed us to invite people from outside of Notre Dame to come and spend a semester or even a year. And the first Melchor chair was Kazimierz Sobczyk from the Polish Academy of Sciences. I don't know that that collaboration would have ever developed. It subsequently, we worked together for over 20 years and became very close personal friends. I don't know if that would have happened had it not been for that opportunity. And Professor Yozo Fujino was one of the subsequent Melchor chairs about 5 years later. He spent a semester at Notre Dame, and again, having that extended time together really made a big difference. But I guess what I would tell people that are online is that when you get an opportunity to visit other places, to talk with other people, be outgoing, initiate those interactions yourself. And I think people, engineers in general, are very friendly people. It doesn't matter what country they come from. And so be ready to take advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that insights. I will pass my baton to Professor Mohammed Hashi, who is the vice chair of the committee, to continue with the other questions. Mohammed?
Yeah, thank you, John. I'm the secretary. Fernando
Sorry.
is the vice.
Sorry, Fernando.
No, yes. Professor Spencer, we all know that you have had a very fruitful career and you have mentored many students, young researchers throughout your career. I was wondering how is the way you mentor today different from how you mentored 20 years ago? And what changed in your thinking?
Yeah, Mohammed, thanks for the question. Actually, my mentoring style has changed dramatically over the years. When I was a young faculty member, I was much more hands-on, probably too hands-on. Actually, I prided myself in knowing more about the research problems my students were tackling than they did. I thought that being a good advisor meant knowing every detail of every student's project, maybe even being able to do the work myself if I had the time. And so I thought that by help that I was helping by staying closely involved in everything. But over time, I realized this approach has its limits. And one conversation in particular that changed the way I was thinking about mentoring was with George Hausner at Caltech. George is widely regarded as the father of earthquake engineering. And so I asked him about his mentoring. I said, George, you've advised and influenced so many extraordinary people. What's your secret? And he said, very simply, he said, I tell the students what to do, but I never tell them how to do it. And that sentence had a big impact on me. What I took from it, is that students need room to struggle. They need to make decisions, try things, fail occasionally, recover, and develop their own judgment. If the advisor is always dictating the exact next step, the students may complete the project and complete it very, very well, but they haven't grown into an independent researcher. And actually, this is exactly the style in which I was mentored by my advisor, Professor Larry Bergman. But to be truthful, I didn't realize it at the time. It took a while being a faculty member myself before I recognized how well he had advised me. And maybe just a side note that I've seen this principle in a very different setting through my RC airplane hobby. I'm the president of the Champaign County Radio Control Club, and I've been very involved in this local radio control club where we introduce young people to aviation. And on the surface, you might be wondering, why is he talking about RC airplanes right now? Although if you know me, you've heard me talk about it before. And that certainly seems very different from advising PhD students. But the mentoring principle is surprisingly similar. You explain the basics, you create a safe environment, you stand behind them, sometimes literally with a buddy box, but eventually they take the controls and feel the airplane respond in their own hands. And that has reminded me that good mentoring is not about showing someone how much you know. It's about helping them build confidence, judgment, and independence. So I think of mentoring less as directing and more as shaping. You help students choose important problems. You help them develop high standards. You challenge their assumptions. You ask questions. You open doors. But at some point, they have to take ownership of the problem. And that's when it gets really exciting. I've also come to believe that the deepest legacy of a professor is not the papers or the grants, although those matter. The deepest legacy is the people. Research is the vehicle through which we train our students to think rigorously, creatively, and independently. It also pays the bills. But that realization changed how I mentor. I care deeply about excellent research, but I see the development of these students as the central purpose, as my central purpose, as well as the central purpose of professors in general.
Thank you. Well, it was amazing. I mean, the way that you framed it, that the people is the product or the main impact besides the research. That's very eye-opening and quite interesting, I think. So I wanted to ask you one more question about you've been, as you mentioned, work on a variety of different research topics over the years, and being on the cutting edge research, being adaptive, as you said, not bound to one particular type of school of thought, and try to solve problems using different developments in other fields as well, as you mentioned. I was wondering, among all the contributions you had, including research, mentoring, collaborations, or whatever that I don't have, that I don't mention right now, what contribution feels most meaningful to you? And is there something that has meant more to you personally than people in the field might realize?
Well, you might guess this already, but if someone looks at my CV, they'll see papers, grants, project awards, and deployments, and I'm grateful for all of those. They represent work done by many wonderful students and colleagues, and I'm very proud of that work. But if you ask me what feels the most meaningful, my answer is very clear. It's the students. To date, I've graduated 43 PhD students, and there's still several more coming down the pipeline. And that's the part of my career that gives me the deepest satisfaction. Many of those students have gone on to become faculty members, like some of those in the audience, like you folks, researchers, leaders in industry, and contributors to the profession in their own right. Some are now advising their own students. And so I get to see not only my students, but also my academic grandchildren, and in some cases, my academic great-grandchildren, that is the next generation and beyond. And for me, this is incredibly meaningful. In academia, we sometimes measure the impact through citations, funding, or awards, and those measures certainly have their place. But there is another kind of impact that is harder to quantify, and it's the effect that you have on people, the effect that they go on and have on others. So when a former student publishes an important work, receives an award, becomes a department head, leads a committee, builds a successful research group, or simply tells me that they learned something in our group that helped them later in life, that means a great deal for me. I had a former student, Nate Levine. He's working out in California for Exponent. And he sent me a note one day, and he included a homework assignment on the Buquin model. that was actually developed by Professor Juan Carrion from Cuenca in Ecuador. He was a student here too. And he said, guess what? Today I pulled this out and I had to use it for my job. And so that was really exciting. So the part that people outside of academia may not fully appreciate is how personal that is. Advising PhD students is not a short transaction. It's a multi-year relationship that you built around uncertainty, growth, pressure, and discovery. And in some sense, it's just like your kids. I mean, these students are always have a connection to you. And so to see them develop from people who are still finding their voice into independent scholars and professionals, that's what excites me. That transformation is among the most rewarding things that I've been able to be a part of in my career.
Thank you, Professor Spencer. I would like to take a liberty and say something actually about this. At least someone that I think I can talk about this, because I'm not in your research group. I was not in your research group, but what I noticed, I know through the community and the people that I work with them, that not only you have been mentoring your own students, and as I mentioned in my question, you also very much providing a good environment for other early research, academic researchers or researchers in our field. At least I have the first experience in interaction when I was just started at Purdue, talking to you and met you in some conferences. The way you were approachable as a senior faculty, and we had some good discussions. It gave me this feeling that that you also care about the success of the other people in the community, even though they are not your direct students. And I'm very appreciative in that regard. With that, I would like to pass it to Fernando for questions and answers.
Great. Well, what we're gonna do now, because we have some people on the audience that wanted to ask before we read the Q&A. I know Professor Macris is being waiting on his chair to ask so many interesting questions to Bill Spencer. We wanted him to take the reins and go ahead and ask him difficult questions or easy questions, or he can decide. So go ahead and unmute and fire away.
I have to say that Nikos always has, if they're not difficult, they're interesting questions. And so I'm a little concerned about his questions, but let's see.
Bill, it's so nice to listen to you. You brought, a lot of memories from back in the early 90s when we started together to uncovering the mysteries of structural control. But I think now is the time of the younger people. I think I see here on the chat box a lot of younger people who have burning questions. So how about if I pass the torch to the younger people, and if you come to EMI in Colorado, maybe we can get together there and we can continue this conversation there. But I would like to see what the younger generation has to say, because we are experiencing a transition in academia. You touch upon this in a very nicely way. I'm going to be a little bit face reality into the eyes. So I find myself in a situation where artificial intelligence and machine learning somehow is displacing scientific reasoning. And you put it very nicely by saying, at the end of the day, our efforts have to be rooted in mechanics and applied math. But this is not what is happening all the time, right? So I totally agree with you that we cannot go very far without without nurturing scientific reasoning. But because I think this is a concern to the younger generation, I would like also to hear what the younger generation has to say. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to mute myself. Thank you very much.
Nikos, I'd like to make two comments. First of all, I first met Nikos when he was a graduate student. I went to Buffalo to give a presentation, and the most piercing questions was asked by this graduate student, Nikos Makris. We were all a lot younger then, but I went back to our department head and I said, we got to get this guy. And so we brought him to Notre Dame, and his activities, and both in teaching and research and service, just blossomed at Notre Dame. But the second comment I want to make is with regard to your discussion of AI. And indeed, I mean, AI is a tool. It's not going to go away. But I have a friend, a former student, Brian Ike, and he refuses to use a GPS when he's driving somewhere. He says that GPS makes you stupid. And he only uses physical maps so that he can improve his spatial reasoning. And so the concern I have with AI is, will it limit how effectively students can think? How are we going to use it in classes? Actually, Nikos, I'll be frank with you. I asked ChatGPT, how can I use AI in structural dynamics? And it didn't have a good answer when I teach structural dynamics. But the problem is today, you can get on ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude, and you can say, solve this homework problem. And it will give you a credible solution. That doesn't mean the students understand it, but they can turn it in for their homework, even if they just take and transcribe it onto their own engineering paper. But there's no learning that goes on. There's no thinking that goes on. And so I think the biggest challenge for educators in the near term is because we have to let them use this tool. It's out there. They're going to use it anyway. How can we engage them to use this tool effectively and still learn, still be able to think, still be able to question? And I don't have the answer to that. I hope that these committees, the education committee at ASCE, can take that up as a possible area of consideration in the future. What are your thoughts, Nikos?
So, as you said, I mean, AI is here to stay, and it's certainly a wonderful tool. It may be more than a tool, right? I know some, but I don't know a lot to be able to have a wider and deeper grasp of what is happening. But I have to confess that I got very interested in understanding why it became so powerful, and in looking into these basic concepts of diffusion models and how they basically use concept from physics and statistical mechanics to delocalize the information by adding noise and then reconstruct it back. So the heart of AI is extremely interesting and physics based, right? I mean, the way that these algorithms are built. I mean, for the last 5 years or maybe more, I have a strong interest to understand to quantify the resilience of cities to natural hazards. So by using human mobility data, right? So I use an analogy of the economically driven motion of people in cities, in the same way that thermally driven Brownian particles are moving in liquid. So I have now some good understanding about the quantitative theory of Brownian motion, which some of these concepts are being applied in these diffusing models that they used in AI. So it's really remarkable what these people have achieved the last 10 years.
Hmm.
But if you go to the user, to the students, in the classroom, I think Bill and everybody who's in the audience, the only tool we have is to inspire them about the good things that scientific reasoning has offered over the years, right? So I give them an example, telling them that, let's say that we're at the end of the 19th century, and we have the best AI algorithms, let's say like Claude or Gemini or Chat GPT, and they know Coulomb's law, Ampere's law, they know all these things about the state of electricity and magnetism. Would Claude be able to derive Maxwell's equations, right? Because Maxwell used symmetry, used aesthetics. Actually, two of the four Maxwell equations are vector identities. So he borrowed concepts from mathematics to create this beautiful construct, which are the four Maxwell equations. I don't know. I don't know, Bill. I don't know if Claude will be able to build Maxwell's equations, right? But because the other two is like Ampere's law, Coulomb law, right? So ChatGPT people know about these things. So yes, I think my answer now is just to do what you said, to be cross-disciplinary, to show the students your love from mechanics, your love from math, your love for safety, your love for engineering judgment, right? Engineering judgment is another very important area that is still very hard for artificial intelligence to offer, right?
Hmm.
And I think that the bright students will aggregate all this, and I think in every generation there will be intellectual leaders that will move the boundaries on the envelope.
Very true. Very true.
Great. So we're gonna also have a former student, like many of us, ask a question to Professor Bill Spencer. If Bedus, are you ready to ask a question to Bill?
Yes, Fernando.
Go ahead.
Fernando, thanks for organizing this, and Bill, great to see you again, and thanks for agreeing to do
Hi,
this.
Vedas.
Hi, Bill. So there's been a wide-ranging discussion, and I think they've hit a lot of the points that I was interested in hearing you on. But following up a little bit from the discussion with Nikos, there's a popular quote that's been going around Twitter. I don't know exactly who said it, but it said that you can outsource your thinking to AI, but not your understanding. And I think it's a good way of thinking about the impact. But it is impacting large parts of the way we work, the way organizations work. And then I think it's also impacting significantly universities. And it brings to question, what is going to be the role of the university and the role of a professor in this changing world as AI becomes more capable and is offering the promise to students of personalized mentorship that's difficult for professors to do at scale because our time is limited. So is this something that you've thought about? I think it's very open-ended, so I don't expect very good answers, but is this something that you've been thinking about? And I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I hope I can at least give you an answer. I won't claim it would be a good one, but certainly there's great opportunities for having personalized tutors. AI tutors, they never get upset. They never get frustrated. They always give answers, and sometimes those answers are even deeper and broader than what a professor could, because the AI algorithms, they can understand more about the student. What does the student know, and what do they not know and how can these things be explained to them? Whereas the professor, I mean, for your PhD students, you spend a lot of time with them, but for the students in your class, you you don't spend that much time with an individual student. Similarly, I mean, I'll tell you that my wife teaches online courses in the finance department, and they've got an avatar of her, so they don't have to re-record her all the time. So she can change a particular segment, and the avatar changes. Well, that's pretty close to saying that basically the AI is teaching the class instead of my wife teaching the class. And so, but if you saw during COVID, I mean, you experienced that too. The teaching in the classroom online is not the same, or the teaching classes online is not the same as teaching in person. You can see the individual's eyes, you can see what they don't understand, what they do understand, and you can interact with them in a much more effective way. And maybe in the future there will be cameras on your classroom that will be able to do that. But at least right now, the human element of teaching is still important. The challenge for me, as I said to Nikos, is how can we encourage people to learn? So what does learning mean? All of our assessment methods, if a student wanted to, they could use ChatGPT to do all their homework, and they don't understand anything. And so I still see, at least in the few years that I have left, that professors will be important. But who knows what the future holds? The entire face of the university may change in the same way that the entire face of libraries has changed. When I was a student, you actually went to the library, you read books, you got journals, and of course, the library is just kind of a coffee shop, these coffee shop and study place these days. So it's going to be interesting to see how things develop as we move forward.
Thanks, Mo. I'm going to hand it back to Fernando.
Thank you, Dr. Skier. So now I think if Professor Napolitano want to help me with the Q&A, we have many, and I don't know if we go by the order of appearance or the number of votes. Maybe I will start, and then Becca, you can take the next one. Sounds good?
Sure, yeah. Votes might change as we go through it, so I'm not sure if that would be a good way to do it. But you can figure it out.
Yeah, well, we can start also. I have one from, let's start from the beginning so we don't miss it. So a quick Jaganhira to Dr. Spencer. How is structural health monitoring shaping the scope of work for structural engineers, and what challenges do modern SHM techniques face when being applied to real structures?
A very critical and important question. So as I said before, it's with structural health monitoring, we can collect way more information than we can effectively process, or way more data. I shouldn't say information. And so moving from data to information and understanding is the main challenge that structural health monitoring faces. We've always, we looked at some of the large scale monitoring projects over the years. For example, the Qingma Bridge in Hong Kong, they've been collecting data for nearly, seems like 30 years, 25, 30 years. And so how do you process all this data and ensure that you understand what's going on with the structure? So that's one of the places that I think that AI and machine learning has the opportunity to detect anomalies, to understand what those anomalies mean in the context of the engineering structure. So one of the things, I'll relate one other story. I don't know how true it is, but I heard this story from another Caltech professor, Tom Kogi. And he said that he related it to me like this. He said that Professor Lebesgue from Lebesgue Integration, that he was being interviewed in his later years in his life by a newspaper reporter. And the question was, Professor Lebesgue, you must be very gratified to have had so many of your theories accepted in your lifetime. And Professor Lebesgue replied, son, you don't understand. My theories were not accepted by my colleagues. My colleagues are all dead. My theories have been accepted by the young people out there. And so this is really what I see that's exciting about the current state of things, is that so many people, even like myself, are accepting these new technologies in AI. They're being embedded in every aspect of our technical and personal life. And so it's really a game changer. It's really an exciting time. It's not like it was before, where it took generations to accept new ideas out there.
That's a great answer. There's a couple of questions, Bill. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, but there's a couple of questions that are really all getting at the same thing. And so I'm actually going to combine, Fernando, the question from Semrul, Elaha, and Masa into.
Yes.
I think that they're really all getting at the same thing. And essentially, it's like for PhD students, for early career researchers who are trying to build a meaningful and long-term career in academia. There's a lot of pressure to produce results and publish and secure funding. And sometimes that can be pretty overwhelming. And how do you see the future of academia evolving in terms of this focus on metrics? And what's your advice for how we can really balance some of that with our scientific curiosity as we kind of get a lot of pressure?
So I guess that if you look at the AIs these days, at the bottom, it always says that they can make mistakes. And so I'll provide my thoughts in terms of this question, but please take it with a grain of salt, that this is just my opinion. So first of all, with respect, I'll divide this into two parts because it's a little different for graduate students and for early career faculty. So for graduate students, in a sentence, my advice would be, don't define yourself too narrowly too early. It's important to become excellent at something. You have to do that to graduate. You need that depth. But don't let your dissertation topic become the boundary of your intellectual world. The most interesting work often, as I had mentioned, occurs at the intersection between various disciplines: civil engineering, computer science, structural dynamics, control, mechanics, statistics, et cetera, et cetera. So I would advise them to prepare themselves for this ever-changing world, to take courses outside of your department, learn the language of other fields. Don't just take the AI course in civil engineering. Take the AI course in mechanical engineering. Take it in computer science. Learn from those in other disciplines. Talk to people who think differently than you. If you only know one tool, every problem starts to look the same. If you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But if you build that broad foundation, you'll be able to adapt as the field changes. I'd also tell graduate students that research is supposed to be hard. If you're confused, if you're stuck or uncertain, that doesn't mean that you're failing. It often means that you're doing real research. And the key is to keep moving, keep asking questions, and not suffer in silence. That is, be persistent. Now, for early career faculty, the advice is a little different. Of course, the tenure track years can create enormous pressure. You're trying to publish, raise funding, teach, build a group, serve the profession, and establish your identity. And to be truthful, I think that was what drove a lot of my hands-on micromanaging mentoring when I first started out as a faculty member, because I felt this pressure that I have to do it. And it's easy to be consumed by metrics, papers, citation grants, um, rankings, H-index. And those things indeed matter, especially early in your career. But you have to realize they're not the entire story. So my advice is to build your career around people and problems, not metrics. Choose problems that matter. Invest deeply in your students and your colleagues. Help your colleagues to develop. Um, that's going to really pay off greatly. Create a group culture where people can do excellent work and grow as human beings. If you develop outstanding students and work on meaningful problems, the papers and the recognition will follow. That will follow naturally. And I guess most important for young faculty members is to be patient. Academic careers are long. Um, Fernando, I think, mentioned that I'd almost been teaching for 40 years, but I graduated in 85, and I was actually, I taught a class of 46 students. Had sole instructor responsibilities as a first-year graduate student. So I've been teaching classes since 1981. And so you don't need to solve every problem in your first 5 years. You need to build a foundation that allows you to keep growing for decades. And that's how to build a truly meaningful career.
I think that's a great answer. I just got my tenure yes, and so I'm just coming off the other side of this. And I think that that's all, it's actually really true as someone who is right here in this moment. Sometimes it might be easy for someone to say, well, yeah, Bill Spencer got tenure, obviously. But I think I really do, as not a Bill Spencer, want to say that this idea of making it around people and making it around problems that you care about is going to carry you way further. I did the same thing that you were talking about with the micromanaging in my first few years. My grad students were very fried in those first few years. We had to sit down and I said, okay, guys, I've learned a lot about what not to do. Let's try and figure out how we want to create this group culture so that way we're not all being fried by the end of this. And I think, again, like part of it is just being adaptable. And that was the advice you gave to the grad students, as well as the advice that you gave to the early career faculty. So I think that's really great. Fernando.
I might add one thing is that life for you young faculty members is much harder than when I started out. I remember clearly that when I got tenure, I had 14 papers total. That included my papers from graduate study as well as papers during my first 5 years at Notre Dame. And so today there's PhD students that come out with 14 papers just out of the gate when they start on day one. I've seen being on the P&T committee, I've seen associate people that are going up, assistant professors to associate, that have 35, 40 papers and grants, and wow. But that's the expectation today, and it's a much higher bar than what it was when I started out. So keep up the good work. I know it's hard, and you guys are doing a great job.
And if I can add something, Bill, on what you said, because I'm not so sure actually that if I have started as an assistant professor now, I will make it because because there is so much lack of direction. I think to me this is the biggest challenge, that when we are now let's say at junior faculty, how you carve your future, your scientific future, where you go, what you do. You go into machine learning, you go into probabilistic methods, since uncertainty quantification. There are so many things. And there is also, if I should say this with a small voice, because of all these tools, there is also so much mediocrity that is thriving. So how you break through the mediocrity by doing artwork, good quality work that is close to artwork, so that other people can appreciate. It's a much harder environment. It's a much more competitive environment. So on that note, because I have to go, I want to say one thing to the younger people. Um, I think that Bill said wonderful things today and very inspiring and very true. But I think it's important to go to what Bill said, to go back to to don't turn your back to the fundamentals. Don't turn your back to applied math, to control theory, to structural mechanics, because these are the things that are going to give you confidence. The most useful tool that you need nowadays is confidence to move forward, right? And those who are confident are going to make it. And those who are good but not confident, they will be in a much more a fragile situation. So, uh, if you ask me what is gives me pleasure in what I do, are those papers that I did, which are not the papers that I have the most citations, right? But are the papers where, when I wrote them, they helped me to transition from confusion to clarity. So if you have the chance to invest time, this doesn't happen very often, right? But every now and then, every 3 4 years, you deal with a problem that is a hard problem, right? That it's of interest to a very small fraction of the community, right? And this is usually why these papers don't get a lot of citations. But the joy that comes when you transition from confusion to clarity is irreplaceable.
Very well said.
So we have two other questions on the chat, and it's related to what Nikos was mentioning, and maybe it's too specific, but it's a challenging question, I think, from Piyush Kumwar. Professor Spencer, when someone with no engineering background can run a finite element algorithm model or train a damage detection algorithm in an afternoon, does it still make sense for a graduate student to spend years going deep in one area? Or is the smarter path now to become someone who picks things fast and connect the dots across fields? I guess between breadth and depth, what is better for a graduate student?
So I think it's a question of what your goal is. And so as engineers, as a PhD student, I think that there should be some important problem that the student is trying to solve. And so they can use whatever tools they want. Now, on the other hand, if your goal is to just write a bunch of papers, then you can cherry pick the technologies and superficially apply them as needed. But it's being able, we as engineers, our goal is to solve problems, to bring meaningful solutions to problems that our society has so that we can improve the life. I don't remember exactly the slogan of ASCE, but it's something like, we make lives better. And so if you focus on that, then clearly this cherry picking, these superficial grabbing technologies to get out the next paper is not the best approach, but rather solving important problems.
Vega, you want to ask the other one?
Sure, yeah, there's one last question that's in chat. We're about 12:20, and then I think, Fernando, you have a closing question. So this might be kind of good. Yeah. But based on all of what you have given for advice today, the question Nishan is asking you, what are the first 5 things that you would do if you were to start as an assistant professor this coming fall? Not conceptual, just like, what are the first 5 things?
Wow, that's a hard question to answer right off the top.
I have to go. Thanks to everyone. It was great reconnecting with everybody. Bill, it was wonderful. Looking forward to see everybody at the AMI. Bye, guys.
Boulder.
Great. Take care, Nikos. So I think the first thing that one has to worry about is teaching. And so the students are going to be there. You're going to have your class, and that's going to happen whether you like it or not. And so make sure that you take time to understand what your class is about, um, get a good set of notes, and make sure that you can do well by your students that are going to be in your class during that first semester. The second thing is with regard to probably funding, identifying three good ideas and write proposals about those three good ideas and submit them. You're probably not going to get funded your first year, but you're going to get feedback and you can improve it, and then you can resubmit it in the future years. So getting funding is an iterative process. You have to, you have to have a thick skin so that you can keep trying. The third thing, and this gets back to is recruiting students. So how are you going to recruit students to be part of your group? And if you wait until later to do this, then it may be hard. You're going to be alone for that first year or two. And so then I guess maybe the fourth thing, if you're whether you're computational or you're an experimentalist, is you need to establish your laboratory. Start buying the things that you need. Um, one of the things that we used to always do is I told the new faculty, if after 3 years, if your startup fund is still full, you've done something wrong. You need to use that money to launch your career. And so not hoard it for a rainy day, because hoarding it for a rainy day is probably not going to work. And then the last thing is, I think that was four, maybe. The last thing if that's what oftentimes will sink a young person regarding tenure, is they've got some empty box there. So make sure that you push for all of those areas. And then the last, I guess maybe a piece of advice is for a young professor, think about what you want your CV to look like whenever you come up for tenure. And so look at where it is, because if you think about this in year 4, it's pretty much already too late. So think about what you want your CV to look like, and then look at where you are now, and then start making a plan for how to transform your CV from where it is now to where it needs to be to get tenure.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid advice for, you didn't know that you were going to be asked a question about 5 things you'd do in the fall. So yes, I think that's really, I think that Nishan also has said that he's starting this role this fall and been kind of anxious, and so really appreciates that. Something I want to piggyback on that I threw as a comment in there is the people on this call and the people that you meet at EMI Boulder. I mean, EMI has been one of the nicest communities I've ever been a part of. And I have cold emailed so many people on this chat, and I have tried to say, like, what am I doing? How do I do this? And everyone's always been so kind. Fernando, you wrote so many letters of everything for me along the way. I met you at EMI. And so I would say that come to EMI, nice little pitch there, but it's a really good community, and just talk to people in line, meet somebody getting a beer in line and ask them what they're doing. They might be someone that you end up working with down the road. Serendipity is not dead, Bill, even though we have AI. I think serendipity is still pretty big. So sorry to hijack you on that, but please reach out if people have questions. Fernando, I'll leave the floor to you.
Well, let me just make one comment about this serendipity, that one person told me that success is being ready to take advantage of it whenever the opportunity arises. And so it may be that a lot of things happen, but if you're ready to take advantage of them when they're there and you don't hold back, that's where you make things occur.
Great. So I think I want to make some announcements and let Bill Spencer give us a final word of advice. But I wanted to ask you. Well, maybe I will ask you, Bill, to give us your final words, and then I'll share the reminders. If there is something that you want this community, I mean, this is structural health monitoring education, a general community of young, maybe PhD students, and also early career, a general word of advice that you could share so they can remember today.
I think that I would just like to echo what Rebecca said, is that this EMI community is wonderful. I don't want to put down the other divisions at ASCE, but this is really a great place to be nurtured and to grow. And so the thing that I would tell people is get on the committees. Even if you're still a student, you can attend the committee meetings. You can find out what they're doing. You can help to organize sessions, but you become involved, and that allows you to learn so much along the way that you wouldn't get by sitting in your office and just working away on your papers and your publications. I see Tisha has put in the chats how to join technical committees. And so for those of you who are still online, please copy that link so that you can find something that meshes with your ideas and your understanding. And I'll say this, my experience is that all committees are excited about people that are willing to work. So if you just join a committee to have it on your resume, that's kind of irrelevant. But if you come in and you put your efforts and your thoughts and your energies towards committee goals, then you're going to find an even warmer welcome than if you just attended.
And it takes 1 minute. Just fill it in and send it in, and you'll be on the committee. I wanted to do some housekeeping, and then we're on time. I wanted to thank Tisha Kramer. She's basically the person who organized everything, orchestrating the Eventbrite ASC meeting, the registration, the high number of people that attended, and also materializing what we're talking on the committee with Jan Lee, Muhammad, and Becca. I mean, the infrastructure of EMI allows to make this reach directions and amount of people that we couldn't do without her. So thank you, Tisha. I know you are everywhere, not just there, but everywhere. So thank you for that, and we'll do more. We'll ask you to be in the meetings on the Tuesday, on June the 2nd. They are in Boulder. On June the 3rd for education. Be there, attend the sessions. I think that's all I wanted to say. Any other announcement or anything else that we are missing? I think we have another very enjoyable conversation to celebrate. I think we will continue organizing these webinars, and we wanted to thank you, Bill, once again for your time, your words of advice. We look forward to learning other opportunities to grow and explore new directions. Bill, you give the closing statement, and thank you from all of us, from the organizing committee and the leaders on the committees and EMI. Bill, the floor is yours.
Well, it's just been a great pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun. I mean, to connect with all of you, to hear your views, and to share a little bit of my experience over my career. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm very honored and humbled, and I look forward to all the great things that you guys are going to be doing going forward.